and welcome to the YRBiz Roadmap to Recovery webinar series. I'm Karen Dubois, your host for today's session, Configuring Your Offices for New Health and Safety Guidelines. This series is the result of a partnership between the Vaughan and Newmarket Chambers of Commerce and the region of York, with support from the York Region Business Coalition. And it was really created with one purpose in mind, to provide local businesses with information and resources to help them through this reopening phase and as we transition to a new normal. I want to acknowledge the leadership of the partner organizations, Brian Schiffman, who's online, Charles Banfield from the region, Brian's from the Vaughan Chamber of Commerce, and our other chamber leaders, Lauren Davey from the East Gwillimbury Chamber of Commerce, for their open collaboration. It's only by working together that we can chart a path to recovery for our businesses. With that in mind, I'd like to invite Charles Banfield from the region to say a few words of welcome. Charles, over to you.
Thank you, Karen, and hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Charles Banfield, and I'm the Manager of Strategic Economic Initiatives at the Regional Municipality of York. So on behalf of York Region, it's my pleasure to welcome you to this webinar. Today's event is the third in a series of webinars designed to provide a roadmap to post-COVID economic recovery, as Karen has stated, and to help business owners and operators across all sectors get back to business. These webinars provide information and resources that can help businesses navigate the current economic environment and make the necessary adjustments to their operations, which will enable them to thrive in a post-COVID economy. As York Region and the rest of Ontario progresses towards reopening, businesses of all sizes and across all sectors will also be resuming or ramping up their operations. So today's event will explore how to configure your workplace to meet health and safety best practices as your employees return to work. It will also provide an overview of the resources available to businesses and practical tips to transform your workplace. I wish to thank our partners, the Newmarket and Vaughan Chambers of Commerce and the York Region Business Coalition, who continue to work with us in developing and delivering this webinar series. And as always, a special thank you to Karen Dubois for organizing today's event. Thank you all once again for joining us today, and back to you, Karen.
Thanks so much, Charles. Before we begin today, I just want to take a minute to touch on a few housekeeping issues. So we are recording this session and we are using the Zoom platform. So the Q&A and chat functions are open, and we encourage you to make use of those, especially as the presenters are talking. If you have an idea or have a question, by all means put it in, and we will get that answered for you. We will also be providing links to resources that are mentioned by our speakers in the chat box so that you can directly access them and you don't need to try and copy down URLs. Also, following the session today, we will be emailing out copies of the presentation slides from the speakers, as well as a link to the recording of this session and links to where you can access the previous webinar recordings as well. And one other ask, which is this series is focused on addressing your immediate needs that you're encountering as you reopen. So we encourage and we invite you to send us any topic suggestions so that we make sure we're talking about the things that are most important to you. So without any further ado, let's get started. I'm delighted today to welcome Bill and Vicki from Workplace Safety Prevention Services, who do a lot of work with small businesses in and around the area, helping them to understand and implement the new guidelines. So Bill and Vicki, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Karen. I'm just going to put up our slides here 1 second, and then we'll get started. Oh, what happened there? That's not where I want to be. I'm not sure what happened there. 1 second. Technical difficulties. Let's start here and try that again. All right. Sorry about that. There we go. Okay, there we go. That's better. Okay, so as Karen mentioned, we will be talking about safety insights for getting back to business now that we've hit stage 3. We'll try to keep our examples focused on office settings, as I understand that is what most of the workplaces who are attending today have going on. Just a little bit about myself real quick. My name is Vicki, and I'm actually out of the Ottawa area. I'm the Regional Community Coordinator. I've worked here for about 6 years, focusing on health and safety, and the last 2 in this role to help small businesses. Hopefully today's presentation will do just that for you. Bill, do you want to do a quick intro while I get set up?
Thank you, Vicky. So my name is Bill. I'm also the Regional Community Coordinator with WSPS, and I am covering GTA.
Okay, so just a quick caveat here, disclaimer, this information is meant for information purposes only in this presentation. It's not supposed to be medical advice or legal advice per se. As things change so quickly, we just don't want anybody to get confused or end up using misinformation later down the line, which is why these presentations aren't really around for too long, and we update them fairly frequently as the new information comes in. Quick reminder or quick introduction to who we are, depending on if you've joined us for previous information sessions before or not. WSPS is a not-for-profit organization that commits to protecting Ontario workers and businesses, and we are part of the Ontario's Occupational Health and Safety System. We are a proud partner with the Ministry of Labour Training and Skills Development and WSIB. The ministry enforces the legislation, WSPS helps on the prevention side to keep people safe, and then WSIB, of course, is there if someone does happen to get hurt in the workplace to help you at that time. WSPS helps and offers health and safety expertise in the form of consulting, training, and resources, which is something that Bill will get into a little later in this presentation. And our vision at WSPS is every worker healthy and safe every day. For the agenda today, we're going to, as I mentioned, provide insights to the issues that businesses are facing during stage 3 and reopening with the pandemic, and try to provide some recommendations for safe work practices to keep you and your workers safe, as well as the public that might be coming into your offices as well. So the first thing that we want to talk about is trying to prevent injury or illness, in this case using COVID-19 as the hazard. What we tend to recommend is using what we call the RACE model, which stands for Recognize, Assess, Control, and Evaluate. So the first thing you want to do is recognize the hazard, in this case being COVID, and looking at it in terms of it is a virus that you can contract it if you come into contact with someone and you're not protected by wearing a mask. You could end up catching COVID that way, or if you are touching surfaces that could potentially have the virus on it and then touching your face, either your eyes, nose, or mouth. So knowing and recognizing that this is the hazard and how it kind of works, then putting in the proper controls in place afterwards is your first step to mitigating that risk. Next, you go to assessing. And basically, that's just determining the level of risk in your workplace with this hazard. So using COVID again, essentially right now going into your office as you would have done pre-COVID, you're going to have a very high risk level. And so you want to mitigate that risk by putting controls into place, which we'll kind of give some suggestions in a minute, in order to lower that risk. And that way people will feel comfortable coming into your office, both workers and customers alike. And you will have more of a chance of lowering that risk of people getting sick as well. The next piece is to control and then finally evaluate. So the point of the controls is to eliminate the hazard if possible. In this case, not completely possible. So then it's to reduce the risk associated with the hazard as much as you can. And then you'll evaluate by checking to see if the hazard has been eliminated or controlled, and to make sure if there are any adjustments needed to your controls that you put those in place as well. The one thing that you really don't want is to put a control in place for one hazard and then create another hazard because of the control. So you kind of have to check that out at the same time. So the importance of doing this check for hazards, I'm just going to go through this a little quickly, is essentially that first you want to take the preventive action to protect your employees. The Occupational Health and Safety Act is in place in order for employers to help to follow and implement with the goal of protecting the workers from health and safety hazards on the job. It basically sets out the duties and responsibilities of everybody involved, from the employer to the supervisor to the worker. It also provides information on what the worker's rights are in the workplace as well. So that is going to be the first thing that you want to look at. And it basically establishes the procedures and policies that you need in place to keep everybody safe. Next, you're going to want to get your staff engaged and working together. If your staff is engaged, it then becomes a shared responsibility, which essentially is what we call the internal responsibility system. This gives everyone in the organization direct responsibility. It lets the employers put their policies and procedures in place to keep everybody safe, but it also allows the workers to feel like they're being heard when they see that there's a hazard and they say there's something wrong. If you're working all together, everybody kind of feels like they're being heard, like they are involved in something important, and it moves things along a lot smoother. So this internal responsibility system is extremely important to have in place, and engaging your staff and having them be a part of it is a big piece of that working. Then you're going to want to deal with complying with the legislation, which basically, if a company takes a proactive approach rather than a reactive approach, it benefits everybody. It makes it less costly, better for everyone in terms of everyone's going to be more productive, they are going to feel safer, they are going to feel heard yet again. And it's a lot better than, you know, dealing with a refusal to work situation if someone doesn't feel safe and they don't feel heard. So complying with the legislation helps in that sense as well. And again, it reduces the cost due to the prevented incident. If someone gets hurt, A, someone has gotten hurt, which is never good. And B, you don't want to have to deal with the costs of that person getting hurt, be it WSIB, be it the cost of having to replace that person while they're off on leave. You know, there are so many costs that kind of come with someone getting hurt. It just makes more sense to put this simple process into place to mitigate a hazard and then not have to worry and have everybody be happy. So when it comes to putting controls in place, the biggest thing is you're going to want to try and use this method where you control the risk at the source, along the path, and at the worker. So at the source, in terms of an office setting, essentially it would be, you would want to screen your employees before they come into work, and you would want to screen your customers before they come into the office, especially if it's an appointment-based system that you have. That'll be really easy to put in place. You can just screen them over the phone, asking them a few questions from a questionnaire. And then you can determine whether or not this person should come in, or whether you should maybe push their appointment by a little bit to make sure that their health is okay for them to come in and it's safe for everybody to kind of come into contact. Same thing for the employees. They can do a self-assessment. If they answer any of the questions and it seems like they might be at risk of having COVID, they can then call the employer, let them know, and you can make a decision based off of that, whether they should come in that day or maybe work from home, etc. Along the path would be if you have walk-ins, for example, you can screen people when they come in, ask them a few questions to just double check that everything's okay. If it's not, then you may need to ask them to maybe reschedule for coming in and come in a different time. And then at the worker is basically, you're going to want to make sure your desks are separated enough that you have physical distancing. If that's not a possibility, are people wearing masks? How are you going to control that risk in the office setting at the worker specifically to make sure that they are safe? So the next piece is the hierarchy of controls. Now, the one control that we will not go through is substitution, because that is replacing the hazard, and we can't replace, unfortunately, COVID-19 with anything else. So that one we won't go through. But for elimination, it's basically physically removing the hazard. So the best way in this case to do it with COVID would be to have people still work from home if they can, and only have people that need to be in the office, just to separate how many people are together. I do know that it gets hard when you're trying to be in an office setting and trying to collaborate, and depending on what your work is, that may not work very well, but you could think about maybe a staggered schedule where if people need to have meetings, then they can be the ones that are in the office and other people can kind of work from home that day. Try to figure out a schedule that maybe works to make that applicable during this time. I know it's not ideal, but as much or rather as little face-to-face contact with people right now is probably still the number one best option to try and eliminate the hazard as much as we can. The next piece is going to be engineering controls. So you basically end up wanting to try and isolate people from the hazard, whether that is plexiglass at the reception desk so that they have a protective layer between them and the customers coming in, whether it's the physical distancing, including with the desks, trying to keep them 6 feet apart if that's possible. I know that in small businesses and small offices that may not be an option. Anything from your pathways to try and get the flow of traffic of people in the office to not necessarily be constantly bumping into each other or walking closely together if you can. So those are kind of the engineering controls you can put in place. Administrative controls would be things like updating your policies and procedures to talk about the physical distancing, the hand washing constantly, the decontaminating of spaces. So desks, counters, if you have a kitchen area, anything in the kitchen that people would be touching constantly. Literally anything that would be a common area that multiple people would touch, doorknobs, light switches, that kind of thing will need to be disinfected quite regularly. The photocopy machine, that's going to be a big one. Coffee machines, you might decide you don't want to provide coffee for everybody during this time just to not have to worry about wiping down the button every 5 minutes when people want to go get coffee. It's up to you what you want to do, but then that's going to have to be put into your policies and procedures as an administrative control. And then the last one, which should really be the absolute last option for controls, is your PPE. So your masks, your visors, gloves, and that kind of thing. Now, being an office setting, I'm going to say that what we've seen with studies is that gloves and aprons and those type of PPE things are not really as effective for COVID-19. It's more for if you were already doing a task that required that PPE, that's when you would use it. Keep using it as you would have normally. But the mask and the face shield are really the PPE or the protective equipment that you should be using for COVID-19, absolutely, to try and keep that kind of spacing or that protection from whoever it is that you're in contact with when you can't be physically distant from them. The next control information that I just really quickly want to go through for the disinfectant, we have these links. You'll get these in the presentation that gets emailed to you, but check out the additional resources from Public Health Agency of Canada, Health Ontario, and the WSPS pathogen decontamination checklist. These will give you some more information about the type of disinfectants and what you should be looking at for disinfecting your areas in the office. Something to note is please make sure if you're using anything with bleach that you don't mix it with anything else other than water. If you do that, if you do mix it with something other than water, it could potentially cause a toxic gas to be created, which is not good for anybody. So we really do want to make that known to everybody just to make sure that you're doing things safely when you're using it. Also, check your drug identification number on the disinfectant that you're using. There is, Government of Canada has an approved list of disinfectants that you can use, especially for this purpose during COVID. So if you check that number out on the disinfectant that you're using, that'll help you kind of see. I think it basically just gives you an idea of just how much the disinfectant will work in this situation. So just one last thing for the RACE model is for evaluate. So just a quick example, if a worker's wearing a mask while they're cleaning the washroom, let's say, now that's going to be more if you're in a store capacity, but let's say you have your maintenance people and they're cleaning the washroom and it's really hot and the worker begins to sweat, and the result is that they end up having to reach under their mask to wipe the sweat from their upper lip. They then have to bring this to the attention of their supervisor, and what happens next. So when you're evaluating this kind of a situation, you're basically going to be reviewing the risk and seeing that the risk is people could enter the washroom while the worker is there trying to clean it, and not allowing them to do the physical distancing thing. So you're then going to want to consider the alternative controls. Can the washroom be close to the public? Can the washroom have barriers to prevent entry? Can it have signage stating that the washroom is closed for, 20 minutes so that the worker can do their job and get things cleaned up before the next person comes in? And then it would be to change the control. So this is the kind of process that you need to go through when you're evaluating the controls that you put into place to prevent the hazard, which is COVID-19. Again, the best elements of, the elements of best practice is really physical distancing, wash your hands, manage your environment in terms of the pathways, in terms of where the, what it is that you're disinfecting and how often you're disinfecting it, your administrative controls and your policies and procedures being updated, and the protective equipment that you are wearing when you can't keep physically distant from people. And now I will pass it on to Bill to finish it off.
Thank you, Vicky. So Vicky has already shared a lot of best practice for controls, but it is still important that we need to know that as employers, you still need to follow the law and the directives from provincial and the federal agencies. And some of those laws and regulations can be Occupational Health and Safety Act or Health Protection and Promotion Act. Next, please. Okay, so even at this challenging time, the inspectors from Ministry of Labor, Training and Skills Development are still conducting proactive visits to raise awareness of known workplace hazard. And the point of their inspection is to make sure that all the parties in the workplace, supervisor, employer, and workers are aware of their duties and responsibilities and following the occupational health and safety legislation and regulations. Next one. And public health inspections, and you still need to know that depend on what city and towns you are in. And I know that in most cities and towns in Ontario now, we already have mandatory mask law, and it is, but it is not Section 22. It is based in good faith. Next one. Yeah, and our pandemic business playbook. So as we continue the new normal and many businesses are already reopened, we worked with Leah and developed a playbook. It is not a one-size-fits-all approach, but it is still a how-to guide for getting business back to work safely. And with this playbook, you don't need to start from scratch. And the most important is this playbook can be tailored to meet your specific needs. Next, please. Yeah. Business pandemic preparedness checklist. During the pandemic, there are 3 groups of business. Some business are shut down completely. Some business are essential business and they are still operating normally. And some business, for most of their staffs, are working at home. For all these 3 groups of business, we create a return to business checklist to help them go back to work safely. Next one. Job aids. As Vicky introduced just now, we are part of the health and safety system in Ontario. So we worked with Ministry of Labor, Training and Skills Development and other health and safety associations. And we developed dozens of sector-specific health and safety guidelines. And for office sectors, we have 2 guidelines for them. One is the guidelines for office sector in general, and the other is the guidelines for office admin workers. And we will post the links later. Next one. Yeah, so WSPS also has a YouTube website. And from this YouTube channel, you can find a lot of safety video. And like we have a smart, safe, and supportive video. It is a 2-minute video for education and the training of workers. Also, we have some videos on mask safety basic And we have 2 specific videos for food processing and personal care services workers. Next one. And Vicky and I are both working at a small business team. So that is our small business resources center. We have this website specific for small business under 50 workers. That is the standard of our Occupational Health and Safety Act. And if you click the different links, you can find the specific health and safety regulations for this size of workplace. Next one. And the Small Business Advisory Service, it is a free consulting program for small business with less than 20 employees. Our health and safety expert will guide them either to implement their health and safety system from scratch or to improve their health and safety. And after the program, we will provide a handbook with practical tools. Our beauty consultant team now, during the pandemic time, they are working from Monday to Friday, 8:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. Here is their email address and their telephone number. And that's all for our presentation. Thank you.
Great, Vicki and Bill, thank you so much. And you'll see on the screen, we just put up a poll. This is an opportunity for you to share your thoughts about bringing employees back to the office. So while you're answering the polls, I'd like to introduce our next 2 speakers. We have Stephanie Pritchard, who's the founder of Studio Forma, and Kim Martin from Group Lacasse, who are going to share with us some insights into the designs and the work that they're doing with small businesses to help them get ready for employees to return to work. They're going to be showing you some really cool designs and some neat ideas of creative solutions for accommodating some of these health and safety requirements that Vicki and Bill talked about. So get your vote in on the poll, and Stephanie, I'll turn it over to you.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Just going to share my screen here. Hopefully. Is it working? Oh, there we go. Sorry about that. All right. So my name is Stephanie, and I'm from Studio Forma Interior Design. We specialize in commercial interior design. I'll just tell you a little bit about what we do. So our goal is to create a more efficient, productive, and functional space that infuses your brand and culture. And we had to add a little caveat here and add in while ensuring people are safe at work. So what that means is that we'll help you with your renovation, your interior renovation from start to finish. And that includes all the technical drawings, the permit drawings, your construction drawings, and we make sure that all of these things are compliant with the Ontario Building Code. We will create a 3-dimensional design concept so you can experience your space before you actually start constructing everything. It makes it much easier to make changes. We will also help you with all of the procurement in terms of your furniture, your fixtures, your lighting, all of the little bits and pieces that really create your space your own, all the while being budget conscious. So I thought I would just show you some of the spaces that we've done locally, and then talk a little bit about how we've helped these spaces prepare for back to work and COVID prep. Now, unfortunately, not all of them have been actually implemented, so I'll show you some concepts of what we're doing for the spaces. So ultimately, the spaces that we've designed, we've put a lot of thought and effort into them. There's a combination of private and collaboration and real openness and real brand infused. And the last thing we wanted to do was start just putting up barriers and blockades and walls and creating cubicles all over the space just so people can be safe. So we really wanted to create creative solutions to integrate both safety and brand. So King Cole Ducks is another local space that we designed. Powell Contracting, Cott Lumber. So all these spaces are very, there's a combination of the open and closed, collaboration. Fen and Fen, which is a local company. They're actually a pretty small physical building, 100-year-old building, beautiful. But it's a lot of space that we had to really think about in terms of being creative with, because there wasn't a lot to work with. And what we're going to be doing with Fen and Fen in this 3-person, well, 6, there's 3 people on the other side of this workbench. So we're going to be taking out those little mini white partitions in the middle and extending those to larger, clear acrylic ones that go to the top. So you'll still get that open, airy feeling while keeping people safe. So if we're gonna, here's some conceptual ideas of what we're gonna be doing for Tree Frog, for instance. So on the main floor, because we've got a little bit more space, instead of creating a physical wall or a barrier, what we're going to be doing is adding in some large, tall planters. So all of the workstations in the space are adjustable height. So we had to make sure that people were going to be safe, whether they were standing or sitting. Luckily, we were fortunate enough for these workstations to be 6 feet apart. So we really need to just focus on face-to-face protection. So we have added front screens so that when people are standing, there is that face-to-face protection, depending on how tall these plants end up getting. But by incorporating planters, for instance, we're creating that physical barrier. We're also creating a safe environment, but we're also making it a nicer, more pleasant space. And plants are great for filtering air, so it's such a multifaceted solution. If we look into the right-hand side where there's less space to work with, we've still got 4 workstations, but they're in smaller quarters. What we've done is, again, we've added that front-facing glass panel, but then we've also integrated some movable center partitions. So one of the things we wanted to include in these new updates was really a flexible solution. We don't know what these spaces are going to be required to do a year from now, 6 months from now. So we didn't want to start adding in physical partitions and really tried to create flexible, movable solutions. If you look on the lower images, you'll see these have been implemented, and these are some glass panels that have been added to the tops of the middle spines of the quad partitions. So it was actually really tricky to even get a photograph because it still looks the same. We're just more protected now. And now we had already integrated this separation. So it was a very narrow bookshelf with an on-brand partition, but this is a main path of travel. So this is a great way of protecting workers from either side of this partition, but also creating something a little bit more interesting rather than just a wall. There's an example of a movable partition. You can literally just pick it up and move it anywhere you need to protect people. On the upper level of Tree Frog, we're also going to be integrating additional planters through the main hallway. Again, this will protect the workers as well as protect people walking back and forth. So Powell Contracting, the upper image is what it did look like. And the lower image is the update. So in this case, because the back of these workstations are right on a main path of travel, we had to extend the panels so that people were forced to walk a certain distance away from the workers and their workstations. All of these, again, are adjustable height. So we had to make sure that there were taller partitions. So when it was in the standing position, people were still safe. Again, we added a lot of clear glass panels, and you know, they're really, really hard to see. And when you walk into the space, you don't feel like it's all enclosed. We've also added and moved some storage units to create physical barriers. So people are forced to walk around certain areas. So they're not going to be prompted to walk in behind a worker. And in this case, we've also created some really inexpensive plastic partitions that are hanging from the ceiling. This creates an interesting way of delineating the space and also keeping people safe. So overall, the general guidelines, there's a series of different things that everybody can do. Create barriers and guards, workstation shields, countertop clear safety. You can de-densify your workstations, adding sanitation caddies and stands for wipes throughout the space. There's the idea of creating a checkerboard layout for workstations depending on the amount of space you have. What's really important though is actually to create and allow storage cabinets or pedestals for each individual person so that they can clear off their desk at night, put in all their stuff within their cabinets so that that desk can be then sanitized. Remove any seats from shared tables and conference rooms, so to give people that additional personal space. There's also the recommendation of removing personal trash cans and just have one main unit that everybody puts their trash in. If there's an option to replace any fabrics with antimicrobial vinyl or Krypton or different types of infused textiles, limit the technology sharing, install voice activated or hands-free controls, for instance, your lighting, your water, your soap dispensers. If it's possible to increase the humidity levels between 40 and 60%, this has been proven to reduce infection. And then overall, just improve your air filtration and circulation and ventilation. So this is where a lot of the planters could come in handy, or different types of planters or plants or any kind of solution that would speak to that. So overall, we're in a bit of a strange situation where we have to really entice people to come back to work. People love to work from home. So we not only have to make our spaces safe, we have to make them better than they ever were. So I really hope that everybody tries to sort out and find some really creative ways of doing this. Thank you.
Great stuff. Thanks so much, and great suggestions, especially the humidity. That's something that I hadn't heard before. So, you know, maybe there are these little things that can be done. So Kim, I'd like to turn it over to you and Group Lacasse now to talk about your solutions. Oh, you're on mute.
Sorry, there I am. Perfect. Thank you so much for including us. I'm just going to try and share my screen here. Oops, here we go. Back one. So I'll just give you a little bit of an overview. We're a Canadian manufacturer of office furniture. We've been in, this is our 64th year in the industry, so we've been around a while. We're not going anywhere anytime soon. And actually what we've had to do in the last few months, obviously, is come up with solutions that we could react very quickly to such a serious situation. My background actually is healthcare, so it's kind of funny that I ended up in selling furniture, but I'm a registered nurse by background. So this COVID thing is quite fascinating and quite scary at the same time. So as a manufacturer, we had to turn on a dime really quickly and see how we could protect our workers, not only with our own workers, but with our clients as well. So one of the things that we did was, sorry, my thing is just giving me a little bit of a problem. One of the things we did was quickly come up with some quick ship products that could be sent to customers within a 5-day turnaround. And these are just some images of the 5-day quick ship product. So once an order is placed, it's 5 days manufacturing, and it ships on the next truck into Ontario because we're manufacturing in Quebec. And then we can address people who want to work from home and companies who want to be able to supply that option to their employees at a very cost-effective solution. And height adjustability is also in that portfolio as well, as you can see by this table here. And then we, of course, had to come up with some screens that would be able to protect people. And this shows a reception station with a cutout in the middle so she can pass things through to somebody, but doesn't have to physically touch anybody. I know the hospitals are very keen on this right now. With your health card, you don't even give it to them, you just sort of show it through the window at them, as well as some of our soft seating. So I'm just going to go back. My thing is moving faster than I thought it would, actually. Sorry about that. It's sort of offsetting some of the soft seating as well. And again, this is more quick ship product. Pretty much everything I'm showing here is something that we can ship in a 5-day turnaround, but also staggering the seating off. So when you're sitting here, you've got a table next to you. I'm so sorry, it's going so fast. We've got a table next to you rather than someone sitting next to you. And then we have areas where two people can sit together too, mother and child, or spouse sitting as well together. And then we also have the higher back seating that can be sort of more enclosed, so you still have that feeling of security, but still have that lounge seating. And then we also have some of the screens that Steph showed a few minutes ago, so that the screens that can be put in now, because we don't know what COVID's going to be like in a year from now. We don't know whether, oops, oh my goodness. Sorry, we don't know what COVID's going to be in a few years, or even next year. This might be just stuff going to a landfill, and of course we don't want that as a manufacturer, as a responsible manufacturer. We don't want product just going to a landfill later on. So we're looking at ways of accommodating this now, but what can we do with it in the future for customers as well? So these are portable screens, and then we've got some more seating that's blocked by screens, again in a waiting area, because that's a big part of spaces, is the collaboration areas. And then again in workstations where we have it extending past the edge of the desk, so it gives that little bit more protection than just on the desk itself. It extends a little bit farther along. Here is height adjustability, and our screens actually attach to the back of the surface and they move with the end user. So you notice this one is up higher. It's because it actually travels. When that desk elevates, so does the screen. So that screen is traveling with you. Not only do you have your privacy, but you have protection at the same time. And here we've added them on the end as well to the height adjustable desks. Here this shows the stations from a top view where they were all sitting like they are right now. Open plan is a very big thing in the industry. They're all sitting next to each other. And then how we can accommodate by putting the screens on so they can still sit next to each other, but have those screens protecting each other on side and face to face as well. And here what we've done, we've actually staggered the desks off, so they're not sitting right next to each other. There's a bit of an offset. And again, it shows you just the difference between the offset next to each other and the screens and the tables adjusting with the screens attached to them. Here we've done some storage units, so they actually pull out to be a little bit of a protection on the side, as well as the thin laminate gallery panel, which is just a 1-inch thick panel. And again, we're just showing more of the storage units that are available, that the door actually pulls out and gives that privacy. So it's storage, but it's also built-in privacy. And then people who have existing product wanted to add screens to the top, we can do that. Our screens are used on a lot of different products. Sorry, that's my other line ringing at the same time. Education, and we're a big education supplier, so we had to do a lot with education too, with the screens in the middle. And they can be taken off or moved. And then here we've done it with gallery panels that are actually built right into the product as well. And then this is something that's been it's a year-old product to us, but I just wanted to show this. This is something that we developed. There's 2 companies in the world that do this, and we're one of them. I'm just going to go back one here, sorry. It shows what we call a fuse edge band or laser edge band. So if you notice the division on a standard laminate top, where you see the actual reveal between the laminate and the edge banding, we have a fuse edge now, so there's no reveal at all. And we use this in hospitals and education clients. We're selling more and more of it to commercial clients as well, because it's actually antimicrobial. So nothing can get into the surface in between where the reveal is and cause bacteria to grow. All of the surfaces are finished top and bottom, so there's no exposed particle board, which is something that's really key. And we've been doing it for about 1.5 years now. And like I say, I've done I work with a lot of hospitals and education clients with this, but now that this COVID thing has hit the world in a scary way, we're quoting it more and more with our commercial customers too. And so there's 2 companies in the world that do it, and we're one of them. I think we're the only Canadian company that is doing this at this point. But that's pretty much just the overview. I just want to show you some of the images and some of the quick ship things that we do. And really it was, how can we address our customers and make our customers feel more comfortable as quickly as possible. So everything that I showed there is pretty much a 5-day turnaround to ship to you.
Great. Thanks, Kim and Stephanie, so much for sharing those ideas. And, it's always helpful when you see layouts just to be inspired by ideas. The Q&A is open now, so I'd like to encourage people to submit questions. We also have a poll up. The previous poll, by the way, the results were 77% of the attendees are looking at partial return rather than full return. So I think that's fairly consistent. And as the responses are coming in on the current poll, I think some of the concerns we're seeing is overall cost and the ability to maintain frequent disinfection. So I'm going to just pose a few questions, but again, if you have a question, you can use the chat or the Q&A function. Vicki, you mentioned photocopier being a key one. What about coffee machines and whiteboards? I'm thinking those are sort of things that people use every day and are part of their standard work practices. So what should employers be thinking about with respect to those things?
Yeah, so the coffee machine, I know I was talking fairly quickly. I did kind of try to throw that one in there a little bit too. So for instance, with us, when we start going back to work, to the office for work, at least in the Ottawa office, I'm not sure about head office in Mississauga, but we've decided that we're actually not going to use the communal coffee pot, so to speak, because we don't want to have to be worrying about disinfecting the button every 5 seconds when someone wants a cup of coffee. So potentially you might want to look into the option of everyone just kind of brings their coffee from home in the morning, and if they need a coffee, they go, you know, out to get it from a drive-through or something. It might just make it a little easier. It depends on how many people are there, how many people are using it, how often. Otherwise, you're really just going to have to disinfect it literally every time you use it. Make sure that you disinfect the button before you go ahead and use the machine. Yeah, the photocopier was one that you're going to have to wipe down all the buttons. Most of them are touch screen now, so make sure you wipe that down. Pretty much, again, anything that you are going to use very often and that multiple people are going to use very often are just, they're going to have to get disinfected. There's no real way around it.
Right.
Yeah.
So one of the questions I have is, Stephanie and Kim, you've worked with some small businesses to do their reconfigurations. How long did that process take?
Well, the design process and the layout process, you know, takes about a week or so, but then we have to actually order the product to be installed. And, you know, that's why Kim was talking about the quick ship program. So if we can utilize some of those pieces, then the whole process can take a couple of weeks. But if we want something a little more custom, then it'll just add time to that. And depending on what it is and where we're getting it from, you know, it could be up to 6 or even 8 weeks. So.
Oh, okay.
I know.
And actually, on that note, are you seeing for some of the basics like glass partitions, are you seeing, you know, delays in or difficulty sourcing vendors and then delays in being able to source the products?
Yeah, I think Kim could probably speak to this a bit, especially on the plexi. So.
Yeah, the plexi market apparently has a big shortage of plexi. And I know we've had lots of requests, and you know, we're quoting screens and people are giving us orders for, you know, 400 screens here, 500 screens there. It's kind of crazy. But so far we've had no trouble. We're sort of ahead of the game. So what the company did as an overall was we shut down our company for 2 months to protect our employees. I know a lot of manufacturers still were working, but we decided that we would shut down, make sure that we were going to keep the employees safe first and foremost. That was our most important endeavor in March. And then what they did was they were sort of forward thinking. In January, they started ordering the plexi in advance to make sure we wouldn't run out when things came to that point, because I think a lot of people are finding that it's very difficult to get. But so far, we've been very lucky. We've not had any issues with our suppliers so far getting what we needed to supply for the customers. And the quick ship program has really helped. You know, we've done, you know, jobs with companies like Google where we needed to have home office, you know, that was very important to them. And we just sort of kept the configurations sort of compact. So, you know, a 54-inch wide desk, something small and quick, and really, like I say, if an order went in today being Thursday by noon, it would ship next Wednesday into Toronto. So that's how fast things are turning around, and some of the soft seating as well. But most importantly, I think, is the ability to have the plexi and have some of these small desk configurations ship quickly. And so we've been able to accommodate that.
Okay, great. And what happens, and this might be a question more for Vicky and Bill, what happens when one of your employees is diagnosed with COVID? You know, at what's the recommended action at that point? What do you do with your offices?
For the actual office space, I'm not 100% sure, other than just disinfect it. And you have to sort of, there's a fine line that you have to watch when you're disclosing this to the other employees, so that they are aware of the fact that someone could potentially be sick, but without kind of overstepping that person's privacy as well. But you do need to make sure that people are aware. You do need to ask that specific person, you know, not to come in while they are, you know, potentially sick until they get tested, and then you can kind of figure out exactly what to do from there. This is one of the things that you'll have to put into those administrative controls that I was talking about earlier, updating your policies and procedures. You're going to have to figure out what your procedure is if someone does seem to be sick with COVID. But the main ones that we seem to be hearing are, they don't come in, they get tested, and then you kind of come up with your solution from there of what to do for next steps for return to work, or how long they're off and that kind of thing. And then you do have to let the other employees know in case they want to get tested if they were in contact with the person, but you don't want to necessarily disclose who the individual is or anything that could kind of negate that privacy factor of the individual.
Right. And assuming that you want to disinfect your office areas, I'm assuming it doesn't require a specialist to do that. It's just, you know, good cleaning and common disinfectants.
Just do a good deep clean is yeah. I think basically what we're understanding.
Okay, great. For anyone that's interested, by the way, our next session next week is actually on HR and employment law issues post-COVID. So if you are looking at those policies or have questions about what your rights and role is and responsibilities as an employer, I'd encourage you to join us next Thursday for that session. I did want to take a minute and flip over to a program that would be of interest, especially for those organizations that are concerned about the cost of retrofitting your offices. So I'm just going to take a second and flip over to this. And you may have heard about it on the news. It's called the Canada United's Small Business Relief Fund. I've got the URL there, but I'll put it in the chat as well. And this is an initiative to encourage people to buy local. They've got over 60 participating companies across Canada. And it's really easy to do. So as you go and watch the videos or use the hashtag or visit them on Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook or LinkedIn, RBC contributes 5 cents for each visit to this small business relief fund up to a maximum of $2 million. And then small businesses who are looking for grants to support either the acquisition of PPE or this reconfiguration of your offices, you can apply as long as you're a small business, and the deadline is August 31st for applications. So there's two pieces here. Whether you're interested in pursuing this as a funding source to be able to reconfigure your offices or not, you can actually help contribute to the building of that fund by doing some activity on social media. And then the other would be, if you're interested in the grant itself, you can visit that URL and look at the application process and put your application in by the 31st. So I just wanted to mention that. Let me just stop sharing the screen. And I'll do a quick check. I don't see any questions or posts in the chat. So I'll just put it back to our panelists. Is there anything that, in our conversation today that struck you or you found interesting or you want to reinforce as a message for the businesses that are listening in today?
So Karen, just back to your question just now, I will also suggest an employer to report this case to Ministry of Labor, Training and Skills Development and WSIB and the local public health.
Okay, that's
Yeah.
great. Thanks, Bill. I appreciate that. Yeah, so making sure everybody is notified and the appropriate authorities. So again, just something to be aware of in case that happens. I think that's going to wrap us up for today. I want to thank Bill and Vicki and Stephanie and Kim for joining us today and sharing their expertise. If you do have any questions, by the way, after we disconnect, feel free to send us the question and we'll connect with our speakers to get you the answer. And then I mentioned that we have a session next week on HR and employment law. Try to be there for that. And then the week after that, we have a presenter from Environics Analytics that have some really cool insights to share, basically aggregating mobile data, de-identified, to show you where customers are moving and the breakdown by geography. We're going to look, take a good look at the Main Street area of Newmarket, and we're going to look at the Vaughan Metropolitan Center area, the VMCC, and look at it, how it's changed sort of pre-pandemic, at the height of the pandemic now, and then as people start returning to work and school. So that's it for us today. Thank you again to all our panelists, and thank you for joining us. And we hope to see you on a future session. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.
Thank you, Karen.
Thank you.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye-bye.